I will say to our guy who's like 40th on our depth list, I'm like, try to be the best 40th guy in the state. Like, that's a legitimate goal, and that would be something you could be really proud of. If you could look down the list and be like, I'm the best 40th guy in the state, that means that I'm on a great team and I'm doing things the right way. And I'm helping the guy who's 39, who's helping the guy who's 38.
Welcome to a Run On Culture podcast, featuring local runners and coaches helping us define a culture of success. Join the competition this week at the LaSalle Explorers Virtual Mile and 400. Register today at runsignup.com/explorersmile.
Okay, we're here with Greg Bielecki from LaSalle High School in Pennsylvania. We are going to talk running and training. Greg, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Scott. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. Really honored.
This is going to be a great podcast to the best programs in the state over the last couple of years. A little rivalry. I know our guys were like, "Oh, how you gonna interview him?" Like, it's kind of funny.
I'll tell you, man. I mean, when you guys won this fall, I said to our guys all year long, like, you run a program where I watch year in and year out. Like, your young guys just keep developing. They show up and race really tough on race day. So while we might, really want to try to beat you every time, I and all the guys on my team have a ton of respect for you and your team. You clearly run your program the right way. I mean, if we're ever going to lose a meet, there's never any shame in losing to a team and a program like yours. So I was really happy for you and your team. They ran a heck of a race, and it was a great season for you guys. So I was really happy to see how well you guys ran at NXN. And I love that it, and I know this is how you view it. It raises the bar for everybody, and that's what we want. It's why I love going to the state championship. So many good programs, so many great coaches, and it helps all of us just try to be better, which is really what the name of this thing is all about. Just trying to get better.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of shared camaraderie in running, which is unlike a lot of other sports where you can kind of celebrate your quote unquote rivals' success in a way that maybe you don't do in other sports.
Without a doubt. Yep.
I'd like you just to start out, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history in running, how you got into it.
Started a little bit in grade school, just kind of stay in shape for other sports. I think that's a pretty common story. And actually, so I went to LaSalle for high school. And when I got to LaSalle, I considered ice hockey my primary sport. That's what I played freshman and sophomore year. And really, like, a big part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with my life is, Pat Devine was the head coach at LaSalle at the time, and I ran cross country. And then both those years I went out for outdoor track after the hockey season was over. And I just saw the culture and the team environment that he built. And after a couple of years of kind of being on the edges of it and sort of kind of getting into it, I just realized, I was like, this is something I want to be a part of in every way possible. So I stopped playing ice hockey, ran all 3 seasons, loved every minute of it. My experience with my teammates, my experience with Pat Devine. And then it was kind of a natural transition from there. I chose Haverford College, where Tom Doyle is the head coach and who had run at LaSalle, coached at LaSalle, was the head coach when Pat Devine started as his assistant before Pat took over when Tom left to go to Haverford. So when I started looking at schools and I visited there, literally from the moment I stepped into Tom's office, I knew that was, the place that I wanted to run and the place that I wanted to go to school. I've got a million Tom Donnelly stories, they're all unbelievable, but in as much as Pat, presented me with this opportunity to be a part of this team culture that made everybody feel really valued and included. When I was with Tom Donnelly, every single time I felt like I was in the presence of a mind that just, took each kid and saw the vision of how they were going to progress and grow over the course of 4 years. And he would even say to me, and hopefully beyond, he's like, I want you to continue to do this for as long as, you have the passion to do it. And he just painstakingly thought through, everything we did, and he shared our highs and our lows with us. And, he was the number one person in our corner the whole time. So, after 8 years of running with those 2 people, it was pretty simple for me what I wanted to do with my life. If I could do, half the job that those 2 guys have done, I'd be pretty proud to have done that with my life.
Yeah, there's probably not much better of a mentor in Pennsylvania, at least, or in this area than Tom Donnelly. He's a legend. So let's talk a little bit about then how are you approaching training for your athletes right now with the shutdown and with the lack of an outdoor track season?
I try to handle things that come my way the way I would like these guys to handle things that are going to come their way, and that in every challenge is an opportunity. Things often in a race, in a week, in a season, in a career are inevitably, you're going to have times where things don't go the way you want. Obviously when I left practice on Wednesday, March 11th, I had no idea that I haven't seen those guys since. It's bizarre, right? Like I can't think of a time where I went this long in my life without seeing the kids on the team. But in all my early emails before the April 9th announcement, and then even all my emails since then, I'm like, look, like we can either, feel bad for ourselves, be down on things and just kind of like lose momentum and motivation, or, we can look at this as an opportunity where we have a chance to do some things that we don't often do in the springtime. We're a team that will usually do like 2 doubles a week in the fall through most of the fall. In the spring, we usually do 2 doubles a week, like for March, and that's it. Because after March, you're having at least 1 meet. Some guys are having 2 meets a week. So I said, look, like you guys have online classes that don't start until like 8 a.m. You don't have to travel to school. I was like, you guys can get up at 7 o'clock and go for a run, shower, eat breakfast, and be ready for class at 8 a.m. So we can experiment with our mileage being a little bit higher than we otherwise would. I said, and also without having to do like super race specific stuff right now, we can kind of experiment just doing a little bit longer stuff, a little bit slower and easier stuff, but just try to get like really strong in a way that we never get a chance to do during the school year. And we had a bunch of guys run that Henderson, virtual 2 mile in the last couple of days. And we had a couple sophomores who indoors barely broke 450, if they broke 450 at all. And one of them broke 950 and one of them ran 950. I was getting emails from guys. I almost did a backflip the other day. My wife's like, what the heck happened? And I was like, I try to always tell them, like we're training to do things the right way, whether the payoff is there or not right now. Sometimes you got to hang in through. So it was really cool to see some of those guys able to go out and on their own get a result that they can be really proud of. And I think it's just sort of a byproduct of them buying into, hey, I don't know. Before the April 9th thing, they didn't know if they were going to have a race. I think the closer we got to April 9th, I think we all realized that looked pretty unlikely. And we also tried to approach training that way, going, so much of all of our lives right now has kind of changed and become different. Going out every afternoon and running for 45 minutes to an hour is something that we can do that stays the same. It's something that can anchor us and give us that, tangible thing that we can do each day of normalcy. And, I kept emphasizing to them, even though we're not all together, everybody else is going to go out and do this at the same time. So we can think about each other when we're out there. We might not be together, but we know we're in this thing together. So
I like that idea of having them do it all at the same time and getting out there, kind of practicing at the same time. That's pretty cool. And it looks, your kids did run really well in that virtual 3200.
Dude, I was super impressed. That was awesome. Yeah, really excited.
That's exciting to see, to see those kids still developing and still have that commitment level.
Yeah.
Do you follow the guys on Strava? Do you use Daily Mile, something like that?
Yeah. All of it. Yeah. They almost all use Strava. We have they have a Strava club. That started really for summer training, because I wouldn't see them for long stretches of time in the summer. So they could, and they like to follow each other too, way more than they like me following them, or even that I like following them. I know that they love that aspect of it. There's definitely that accountability piece there. But I've just been sending them a Sunday email each week, kind of a little training, a little motivation, breakdown day by day, my rationale for stuff. And then, lots of emails and texts all week long. Some guys it's not daily, but it's pretty frequent. And, some guys it's like a once a week check-in, but a lot of communication with a lot of guys over the last 7 weeks. It's hard to say 7 weeks, but, in a way it's been, I wouldn't have wanted this, but it's been a neat experiment for those guys. And they've sort of bought into this thing like, well, hey, this is the hand we're dealt right now. So let's do with it what we can.
Yeah, it's interesting to see which kids are kind of stepping up and which kids are embracing this. And you have a little bit of both. You have some kids that aren't doing as great and are struggling a little bit. And then you have some kids that you're like, wow, this kid is like taking off.
Absolutely. And I think the message to the guys that are struggling is, of course, it's hard. I remember when I graduated college and the first fall I was out of college going out and trying to do a workout by myself, not having Tom Donnelly standing there holding a watch, not being in a workout group, you get to interval number 6 and you're like, do I do this one? Do I need, and you start to realize like, what a comfort it is to have a group mates where you're like, well, they're ready. They're going to do it. I can do this, and having a coach there look at you and say, you're okay. You can handle this. There is some important and I think pretty cool growing up that goes on in that, and you start to ask yourself like, well, why do I want to do this? Which sometimes is a question I think you don't ask when you're just in the daily grind of, well, this is just what I'm doing. This is just what I'm doing. Those guys kind of have that space to think about those things right now. And I think they're all going to be better off for it. Like, I keep saying that in my emails, and I'm hoping I'm not like wearing the line out, but I keep saying, I think all of the best teams that have really kind of created the right type of culture and the kids that have grabbed onto the right type of values will have come through all of this better than they were before. It doesn't mean that we enjoy, missing the spring season. But like we said, in a lot of those challenges are big opportunities. And I said to our guys, I was like, the Downingtown West guys are doing it. Like, I know they are, I have no doubt about it. Because I watch your guys race, and when I see them race, like, I know how they train. And if I know how they train, I know the way they think. And if I know the way they think, then say to our guys all the time, like, you never take a day off if it's freezing cold. You don't take a day off if it's snowing. You don't take a day off if it's Christmas. You don't, you just don't, and so just because we're not in school, we're not taking any days off. Just because we're not going to race, we're not taking any days off, you just do it.
Yeah, I think that you touch on something where I think the programs that have that set of values, that set of culture already established are going to come out of this fine, maybe even stronger. And maybe some of the schools that didn't have those things in place, hopefully will realize, hey, we need to get these things in place. And now you have another big opportunity for these guys to show the work and what they've done and to be competitive next week, right?
Yeah. We're going to host a virtual mile and 400, kind of making sure like all the guys on my team, get a chance to go out and do something. But it would have been the week of our league championship, and it was going to be the first time ever that we were going to host our league championship. We had redone our track like the last year, and it's exactly a month after the invitational that we started hosting last year. So I just thought a good time to sort of, try to celebrate what our guys have been doing, by both, staying home, training on their own, doing their part in all of this, and to celebrate, the hard work that they've done. And then also to sort of celebrate and embrace like our running community. One of the things that I really do love about what we all do is, I love going to meets and seeing you, and seeing, Kevin Kelly and seeing, Jay Jones and seeing, all these guys, great coaches that run great teams. I love my guys being able to be with your kids in races and compete, it's a beautiful thing to watch, sometimes I sit back and watch these meets where we are, and I think like, when done right, we have all created a lot of great opportunities for these guys to, test themselves, learn things about themselves, and grow. And I just wanted to create another opportunity for everybody to sort of like virtually get together and celebrate that. And then look forward to being back to it whenever that is,
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that helps do is to create that growth and that character development. When it comes down to athletics at a high school level, we know that not every kid is going to go on to college and run.
No, sure, yeah.
Not every kid's going to, be a professional runner.
Right,
so
right.
It's about teaching these kids and building character. And so that's really, I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah.
So I want to then go from kind of what training looks like now to what training might look like in a typical summer, a typical cross country season for LaSalle.
I mean, I would start off by saying, like, I mean, a couple of core principles underlay everything. And if done right, if I get it right, I think they tie into like the culture of the team. Like, I think if you do it really right, and it can take time, and, but, the core principles of like a culture of a team, which to me is like, I want my team to be inclusive. I want it to be a place where anybody that wants to run, whether they've run before ever, or show up and they're a freshman who's run 4:40 in the mile, no matter who they are, like there's a place for them, they're going to feel valued. That we're process oriented, where the emphasis of what we're talking about is the way we do things, not what happens from that. Try to always emphasize like, okay, state championship is nice, but a state championship happens because of all of the things that went in, and not just in the weeks or months beforehand, but in the years beforehand, oftentimes very long before somebody even realized that they could be a state champion. I mean, I know you've had those moments where you're watching a young kid and you're like, I mean, this kid's something special. This kid could potentially be a state champion. And at that point, that kid's literally thinking about like, can I pass my permit test? Like, I mean, that's like their biggest life thing. And you're looking at them. I mean, I remember thinking about kids and being like, I think this kid could be like a sub 4-minute miler. And, I'm like, and they're like, do I need a jacket at practice is like the biggest thing on their mind, but I think if you, for me, if we're inclusive, if we're process oriented, and we start to teach them hard work, we can then go from there and build training, that fits all of that. And so I think kind of the core pieces then of training is, I want to be like long-term development, like we're never thinking ever just about like this one race or this one season. I mean, even in seasons where we've had really good groups and like, a really good relay, for example, like, I mean, I try to never think like, okay, like we've got to hammer this one workout and this week to make sure that this is the best thing they ever do. Like, I mean, maybe once a season we have a workout where I'm like, okay, you're going to really go to the well. Like, that's it. Otherwise, I mean, I almost always ask them like, can you do one more? Yeah, I could do one more. Okay, we're good. I think that the core principles of training there is like this long-term development, strength-based, repeatable. I ask them all the time, I'm like, do you think this is repeatable? Could you do this again in 2 weeks? And could you do this again next year with another interval a little bit faster? And so long as they can look at me and say, yeah, I can do that again, and yeah, I could do that. I could see myself doing that next year and a little bit faster, but it doesn't mean we don't do race specific stuff. I mean, we certainly do, but days that we like spike up and are going to, run with our hair on fire is rare, if ever, so I want them to learn to love running and love training, and love working out, and not be afraid of it. So, I mean, for us, what that means is, I think it has translated over the years as I've kind of like figured it all out. I mean, being pretty moderate mileage as guys build, so I say moderate, like, we'll have some guys in the summer, in one or two of the cycles late in the summer, maybe get close to 70, but they're hanging in the mid to low 60s for the last couple cycles of the summer. We get into the season as, intensity comes up, the volume comes down for most of our top guys, like top couple workout groups, hanging in the mid 50s. Track season might be a little bit lower, hanging in the low to mid 50s. And then outdoor season is just tough. Once you get past March, volume comes way down, but that's okay. I mean, it's a time in the year where for our distance runners, like volume's a little lower, we're going to take a break and then cycle back in the summer. I mean, again, I try to be really strength oriented in our workouts. Like, so, I mean, if we're at a point in the year where they're not racing, the secondary workout is almost always something strength based, a tempo run, critical velocity, 800s, which is like, I just call 10K pace, sometimes, a lot of times in the fall, we like to do these like long hill progression runs where we'll do like an 8 to 9 mile run, where they'll start off at like 6:50 pace, and we'll end at, 5:40 pace, but we're running over lots of hills because, as we know, at Belmont Plateau and Hershey, it's hard, it's muscularly demanding. And obviously, when we do race specific stuff, but, try to do it in a very thoughtful way. Anything that's hard, I try to space out. I've kind of gotten to the point where, much like you guys, we sort of spread out those races where we try not to race too many weeks in a row. If we're racing, I'm usually not very hard that week, enough recovery time, to come back for the next hard workout. So I guess, like, to sort of sum it up, what I'd say is I like them to run enough miles and hard enough that wherever they would go for college, if they were going to continue on, they can make the adjustment and survive. Not so much that, they get to college and they're like, oh, another 80-mile week, but not so little that they get to college and they're like, oh my gosh, an 80-mile week. Like, how am I going to survive? So I think if done right, you sort of thread the needle that you help them develop, get strong enough that they can conceivably go, to Stanford and run, but have developed and done well enough in high school that, like, they can make that jump, and we didn't leave anything, leave too much meat left on the bone, but like enough for them to continue to grow in the future.
I think that, that's something that I noticed a couple of years ago. And it's something that I thought was an area of weakness actually for our program, was that we weren't preparing kids for that jump to the collegiate level, trying to figure out, okay, well, if this kid's going to be a Division I athlete, they can't be running 40 miles a week in high school cross country. It's not going to work.
I've sat in a lot of coaches' meetings at different points, and I've heard coaches say, like, oh, that program, they run, too many miles. Like, their kids are burned out when they get to college. And I'll ask coach, be like, so how much, what's in that? What's a typical week? And they'll look at me and be like, oh, 30, 35 miles. And I'm like, well, your kid's going to go to a Division III school, and it's going to be 100% increase in mileage freshman year. A couple of your kids may just kind of naturally have been blessed with the ability that they can weather that, but almost all of your kids are going to, wilt under that. They're going to get injured. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to get tired and broken down. Like, I'm not saying that you have to run them 70 miles a week to have them prepared, but, like, you got to train them like a college coach would think, but designed for the high school athlete. Don't train them like a grade school kid that you're trying to extend a little bit, So, and then every kid's different, so there's nuances too, right? I've had some guys that, over the years you learn, like, they thrive on more mileage, and, who am I to say, like, hold a kid back from what I think he's really capable of, we'll have the conversation, like, okay, look, like, here's what I think is wise. Here's what I think is prudent, and that's the other thing I like. We should promote that they start taking ownership of what they're doing, right? Your guys, I'm sure, keep a log. My guys keep a log. I'm like, go back and read it. Like, start thinking, like, when I was, when I felt really good, what preceded it in the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, et cetera, before it. Become a student of what you're doing.
Yeah, we have a saying at Downtown West. It's, we coach you, I don't coach you. And it's that constant conversation. It's that constant talking back and forth and what's going on. And
I tell them all the time, like, ask me a question. If I can't give you an answer for why I'm doing what I'm doing, like, I am gonna think about that long and hard. Like, I say to my kids at home, as I'm home, like, yeah, you got to do that because I said so. Like, but I'm in practice, I'm never going to say that.
How do you balance? You've got 2 young kids at home.
2, yeah, 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Yeah.
I remember when I was a younger coach without kids.
Yeah.
I could put a lot more time in. I could put a lot more in there. And now with the family at home, what's that balance look like for you?
And I think, any job that anybody cares dearly about, you have to, figure that out. Obviously, when you have kids, it's an adjustment. In some ways, I think the adjustment is, I initially struggled with it that first year, remember, and it's funny, like, Coyle, Stone, Magee were seniors the year right before my daughter was born. So, like 2013, we win the Penn Relays DMR, September, my daughter's born, and I couldn't conceive of doing it in a way where I didn't sit around the track and talk to the guys for 30 minutes after a workout and be available, for them to text, while I'm sitting on the sofa at night and, even meet them for a long run. And, all those things that I was doing. And eventually I kind of realized, like, wait a second, but they don't really need me that much. If I do it right, over time, they should need me less and less. So it doesn't mean that they don't know that I'm not thinking about them regularly. I have to budget my time really well, so now I got to get up at 4:45 or 5 o'clock, and I'll sit down with a legal pad and I'll make sure I know exactly what I'm going to say at practice. And, and I can't kind of waste any time, because I don't have the 30 minutes to sit on the track after practice. When the workout's done and they finish cooling down, I got to go because I got to pick up the kids at daycare, get home, start cooking dinner, doing those things, and the time where I'm focused on my family is good. I can't think about training for 8 hours a day. That wouldn't be healthy for me either. In the same way I tell them, they shouldn't be thinking about racing for 8 hours a day. That's not healthy for them either. Yeah, and then there's just the work-life balance of, working with your spouse and, trying to figure those things out ahead of time.
Is your wife a runner also?
She ran at Haverford. Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
That's where we met. So
is she still competitive?
No, but she runs, most days of the week. That's why she usually goes out and runs on the weekend. I usually stay in the house with the kids. Try to find a balance there.
That's a good balance. That's always a good conversation. Who's going to run?
Yeah, exactly.
The next thing I want to do is I want to share, I'm going to put a few pictures up.
Cool.
Kind of talk in whatever direction the picture kind of takes you.
Yeah, that was a good day. Yeah. It's funny. Andrew led off for us when our 4x8, when he was a freshman. We made Championship of America. It was 2010. It was the last year that Bolt ran. And I remember Saturday of that Penn Relays, when we got into the paddock, Bolt was on the track. And I looked up in the upper bowl. It was so loud. The upper bowl was swaying slightly. And I remember thinking, I'm like, we're leading off a freshman in the Championship of America on Saturday at Penn Relays. We're nuts. This is why am I doing this? But I just had watched them work out and watched them race. And I'm like, I trust the kid, he's got this, and he nailed it. And then the next year when they were sophomores, Coyle, I don't think he'd ever broken two. And our leadoff leg handed off the stick to him in 13th on Friday morning, those 9 a.m. freezing cold 4x8s. And he got the stick in 13th, having never broken two, and ran 154 and moved us from 13th to second or third. And at that point I was like, okay, we're about halfway through these guys' high school career. We got something special going. These guys are unbelievable. And then Jack, our 800 leg, we finished third in the distance medley at Penn when they were all juniors. And Jack ran 2:02. He ran really good for 600. And in the last 200, just kind of the normal first Penn Relays thing for a lot of guys where, they're running really well. And, then all of a sudden they start to think about wanting to just be at the finish line and hand off. And then, it gets really, really hard. And I just felt it was 4 years worth of work. Tom early in his career, would make all these antsy, excited moves and not wait. And I just remember watching that race, and he cozied up to the leaders at about 600 in. And the whole third lap, I could see him just waiting. And I knew he was just waiting for somebody else to make a move. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, I can't believe he's waiting. This is beautiful. He often would be antsy and want to jump and go. And he timed it perfectly, and I remember when they crossed the finish line, I just had all these visions of snowy January days of them, running these great workouts on our track when it was nobody but us. I was like, this is a beautiful day, and and they won it today, but they really won it, all those, January and February days when it was really cold and we were the only ones at the track, and, they were training their tails off, and, and those indoor races, at Lehigh, where they learned how to sit and be patient and hang on. And that was, I'll never forget that moment. That was unbelievable.
Yeah. That's a special memory to have that, Penn Relays on Saturday. That's pretty cool. The next picture. So we're looking at the 2017 cross country state championship picture. And this was a pretty cool race.
On the tiebreaker. Whew.
So maybe talk to us about that.
Well, it's funny. too, because, Cardinal O'Hara had tied twice and lost on the tiebreaker twice. So believe it or not, during the week of the race, I mean, having watched the way Council Rock North was running in the couple weeks before that, like the way they ran at their league meet and the way they ran at districts, it's like, guys, this is going to be really close. Like they are going to have a bunch of medalists. And I said to them, like, every single guy that is lining up for us will really matter. Like we can't have a seventh guy that falls off and mails it in. Like, everybody matters today. And if you looked at that race, like Toomey had been, our number 2 guy. I mean, I thought he might be in the medals that day. And about halfway through the race, is like, he is in a bad way. Like he is hurting. And to everybody's credit, like the other guys rallied and stepped up and ran great. And he just never packed it in. He just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And he beat their 5th guy, which made all the difference in the world, because, I mean, that pushes him back a spot and, gives us the tiebreaker. So while I would have liked to have had, a win there that we didn't have to sweat out during the video review period, it was, to me, like a pretty fitting way for this group of guys to win it, where all 7 guys like literally mattered. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, all 7 guys. I mean, they all mattered. I mean, mathematically, they all mattered. And to win it that way on kind of that depth, it was something that we were really proud of.
Textbook race to like show kids in the future, like, look, this is why this matters.
Exactly. Like so many coaches say it and kids are like, yeah, no, whatever. And so now every time I say it, I'm like, no, I mean, this is how we won the state title. I mean, we literally won on the tiebreaker. And it was a great mix of guys. I mean, we had, in Evan and Sean Egan, just these great senior leaders. I mean, Sean Egan, over the course of his 4 years, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I mean, he must have improved in the 5K by like well over 5 minutes. So, I mean, between Evan and Sean Egan, and then a couple juniors who had really progressed and were just cracking the varsity, and then a sophomore class that was, kind of these young upstarts. It was just a really neat mix of kids that year. That was a fun day.
Absolutely. This brings us to, how do I want to word this? Like the changing of guard in the Catholic League.
Yeah.
And kind of what's happened with the state of the Catholic League right now, and how, it went from being, well, I'll let you explain. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Catholic League, what it's like, and maybe some of the history since you've been a coach.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when we joined the PIAA in the fall of 2008, I think for those first several years, there wasn't a year where we didn't have 2 teams finish in the top 10 in the state. And a couple of those years when, O'Hara and we were in the top 10, St. Joe's Prep didn't make it. And I felt like St. Joe's Prep might have been able to be in the mix. Like there was the one year where St. Joe's Prep at the indoor state meet finished, I don't know, either 2nd or 3rd in the DMR at the state championship, but they didn't even make the state championship in cross country. So there was a lot of depth. I mean, O'Hara was, in between, Kevin James and Dan Savage and, they were loaded. I mean, I start listing names. I wouldn't stop listing names, and they were tough. Like they just, every time, like every kid showed up and raced stuff. And then we'd go to Catholic League championships, and not only were there good kids race tough, but then somebody that I didn't even really anticipate would run this huge race. It was hard. I mean, I started coaching at LaSalle in the fall of 2003, and for 5 straight years, we won the Catholic League cross country title. Often good meets, close, and then in the fall of 2010 was when they arrived, and I mean, for 5 straight years, they were lights out. And I just kept saying to my assistant coaches through that whole 5-year stretch, like, we're being tested. This is, really hard for our guys right now, to be in a league where we're running up against, at one point they were 5th at NXN. They ran 10 flat in the indoor DMR the one year. They just did unbelievable stuff. But I was like, but instead of, moping about it and feeling bad for ourselves that we can't win a league title, I was like, instead we should say, like, this is awesome. We get to constantly try to see, like, how close can we be to this team? And I think it was 2015, we had lost the PCL championship by a couple points, but then we beat them at the district meet. And that was enormous. I mean, and our guys, grew kind of overnight from that. And obviously, things have changed a little bit. I mean, they had a coaching change, and the league has changed a little bit. But, I mean, we can only control the things that we can control. There are really good individuals, throughout the league. And so, I mean, there's opportunities for us to, test ourselves still against, a bunch of good individuals out there, and, just try to always, treat the rest of, the league and anybody we're racing against, like with the respect that they deserve, and go out and try to do the best we can.
Would you kind of look at that 2015 year as a turning point for the program? Like when do you look back and say, hey, like this is where the program really turned? Or, for us, it was like 2013, 14, where we kind of saw a shift in our culture or a shift in our, just makeup. When would you say that happened for LaSalle?
When I was in high school, we won a Catholic League title my junior year in the fall of 1997. And then we didn't win another one until the fall of 2003, which was my first year as assistant coach. And then we won in the fall of 03, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And lost in 2010, which funny enough was the year that Pat Devine retired, or he had just retired the previous spring. So the first fall that I was head coach, like with him not there, like I'd been head coach for several years before that, but the first year that he was literally not there, we lost. And I mean, in terms of like biggest mistakes that I've ever made as a coach, and the biggest things that I've ever learned is, and I've realized that if I'm saying this, like that whatever it was for me, I'm sure it was like on order of 10 for our kids was. I mean, I do think that at some point in that stretch, I probably developed this I think not consciously, but this belief that like, well, okay, if we train the way we're training, like we'll go out and we'll take care of business and it'll be fine. And I just remember literally the first race at the first meet in September, we had them in a league meet. And our guys had looked pretty good in the summer, and we showed up and we went out and like they destroyed us. I remember I drove home from school that night and I sat in front of my house and I was just sitting there, like I think at some point like my wife texted me and was like, "Are you coming in the house today?" And I was just sitting there and I was like, I don't know how long I was sitting here. Like I was in shell shock. I mean, like we just did everything over the summer the way we've done before. Like what's different? What did I? And I think it was a couple year process for me where, I knew how to train guys, but I think we had kind of gotten a little bit on autopilot and I had taken some things for granted. And I think then they started to take things for granted. And so since then, I've probably become like a much more paranoid, coach. But like, I really believe this all the time. Like, you only have 4 years worth of guys in your program, right? And once a senior class graduates, you only have 3 years worth of memory moving up. And once you have sustained success, you all of a sudden have this like limited shelf life of memory in your team where like they might not really remember like really hard times. And young kids just look up to the old seniors and they're like, oh, well, that kid trained this way. So therefore, when they get out on the course, good things happen. And we're like, well, no, like, sure, you can run 60 miles a week and you can do this workout, but like, it ain't automatic, like they don't just like put results up because you ran 60 miles and did this workout. It's a crucible out there, like this thing is insanely hard. Like you need to be, seasoned and calloused and prepared for all of the tests that comes your way in this, so, sometimes I feel like I'm scaring the young guys in like, okay, you're training this way and we're learning to race, but you're eventually going to get put in this thing that is going to be, one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life. You're prepared for it, you're okay, but like it's not automatic. So for us, somewhere in that, 2010, 2011, 2012, like I think me as a coach, us as a program, we're like working on just kind of figure that out and doing it against a team that was, a lot of years, it's like even on our best day, they would have to have a terribly off day and I think we still might lose, which in some ways, like actually for a couple of years there, like sort of allowed us the space to learn that. Because like I mean, we're probably not going to win. Like we can't beat them. I mean, they're unbelievable. But yeah, somewhere about in that window of like 2014, 2015, I think we had kind of like, some guys had graduated who had been there for the window of success and went through the tough time. And then we got like just some really good personalities in there, you know, an Eddie Goebel type kid who was just like, I'm just going to run hard, you know, like we can't control. And I think once we had a bunch of guys that accepted, like, look, we cannot control what Cardinal O'Hara does. You know, we're just going to go out and do what we can do. And I think that has kind of carried over, you know, and I mean, we said it in the hotel room this year before we left for the course. I was like, look, we can't control what Downingtown West is going to do. Like, we can only control our race. So we just have to run our race as best we can and hope that on that day, our best is better than their best. That's it. Like, that's the name of the game. And I think it took it took me as a coach, and therefore those guys, you know, time to really learn that. And it's one thing to say it, and then it's another thing to like believe it with every fiber of your body. And I think sometimes the only way you actually learn that and believe that is through that really hard test.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always say, like, for a new coach or somebody asks me for advice, it takes 3 to 4 years to develop your culture. And it's funny, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking of the parallel situations we have with, like, you with Pat Devine, me with Kevin Kelly. You know, I was under Kevin's wing for a long time, learning from him as his assistant and whatnot. And you just get to a point where when that person walks away, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah, it's a little intimidating. No doubt about it. There's no hiding at that point, you know.
I want to transition that conversation into culture, because you talked a little bit about some tenets of culture early in the podcast, and then you just kind of talked a little bit there about some of the things. I always think of culture as a set of values that your team shares.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have defined values at LaSalle that you're like, look, this is who we are, this is what we do, or is it just a general sense? But could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you view culture at LaSalle?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have program goals that, you know, I give them at the start of the season. They're posted in the locker room, you know, but I think with most high school kids, you know, you can give them that and post that and, you know, have them read that. But I mean, it's only going to be as real as what they live day in and day out. And culture, I often feel like, I mean, I am kind of like trying to steer a really big ship that, you know, turns slowly and feels like it moves slowly, but once it's moving, like, has this immense momentum. I mean, I think there are some things that I can do to help steer that, like, you know, one, be inclusive and show them that I am going to value every kid who's willing to come out and do what I ask, you know. And so I'm going to coach the kid who hasn't broken 30 minutes yet in the 5K. Two, I'm going to show them that I'm going to hold all of them accountable to the same standards, that they're there every day. You know, when we're doing drills, they're not cutting corners. And I don't care if they're already all state, you know, doesn't mean that you know, don't do your A skips the right way, you know. And if you're a 30-minute guy and you say to me, but I'm just a 30-minute guy, then we have a problem, you know, because you're a 30-minute guy that needs to be trying to be a 29-minute guy and needs to be trying to be a 28-minute guy. And I'm going to be really invested in trying to help you do that. And I'm going to celebrate you when you do that, because you need to take yourself seriously enough to want to do that. You know, I mean, sometimes I talk to these guys about like the pay it forward effect that a team like ours has. And I'm sure you're very much the same way. Like, I will say to our guy who's like 40th on our depth list, I'm like, try to be the best 40th guy in the state. Like, that's a legitimate goal. And that would be something you could be really proud of. If you could look down the list and be like, I'm the best 40th guy in the state. That means that I'm on a great team and I'm doing things the right way. And I'm helping the guy who's 39th, who's helping the guy who's 38th, who's helping the guy who's 37th, right? You know, so I mean, I'm going to be inclusive. I'm going to hold them all to the same, you know, set of standards. I'm going to think about their training and their race plans and help evaluate the races afterwards as hard as I can, you know, and I'm going to expect them to do the same. We'll celebrate the success of everybody on the team. And that's one thing I say, like, they got to learn to celebrate the success of others. And it's one thing I've been really proud of us over the years. Is like, I mean, we sometimes get lucky where we end up with like a clear number 1 or number 2 guy, but we've gone to the state meet so many years where I'm like, I mean, you could take our top 5 and I'm going to throw the names out on the floor and that's the order today. I don't know. I mean, and I want them to not care, because they're just going to run as hard as they can, as best they can. And when their teammate goes by them, they're going to be like, keep doing it, I'm going. So I think as long as I talk in those terms and I stay true to that, and it's funny, I've got a couple of, great assistant coaches who will periodically remind me after like a hard day, and we've gone up, you and I have done this. We've gone up to Manhattan and run in that Eastern States race. And there's a lot of years where we finish racing and I'm walking back over to the team, with my assistants, Tom Devlin, Doug Demeter, Steve Horvath, and I'll look at them and be like, why did we come up here? Like, that was brutal. And he'll look at me and be like, well, wait a second. Like, what do you say all the time? Like, it's not the outcome, right? I'm like, good, right? Fair point. Like, I have to stay true to that, even in those moments where I'm like, we didn't run great, but we are training great. And we approached this race the right way. We didn't get it right this time, but that's okay. We're process oriented. So I think if as a coach, you have things that and they have to become so part of you that you're saying them and you're living them all the time, that you can't help but communicate them constantly, and your kids can't help but learn them. And once a critical mass of your guys learn it, then all of a sudden it becomes like this sort of self-perpetuating thing. It's funny, you would ask me in the last question about like that tipping point. I remember after Pat Devine had retired in that 2010 through 2012 or 13 window, we had a point where like we had these huge teams that were like 60, 70 guys cross country. And we had a period where like we started going down. We were like 50 and 40. And I remember saying to them, a couple of my assistants, so like, what is going on? What am I doing wrong? And I freaked out for a little bit. And after thinking about it for a while, I was like, no. Like, I don't know if you've ever read Good to Great. It's one of my kind of favorite books. It's like, get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus. It really was, I think, just a group of kids realizing like, oh, like this is not a club. Like, okay, this is not like, I can't just like do this and not do my long run, or I can't do this and like not really train over the summer, or, I can't do this and like go to race and just kind of run through. Everybody, not just the coaches, everybody expects me to run over the summer. Everybody expects me to do my long run, and everybody expects me to run hard when I race. And like, if I go out and run a 5K and guys on the team think that I'm not running hard, when I get on the bus, I hear about it. I think we kind of like in that tough stretch for us, some of those guys, and it was great. A lot of kids would come to me and say like, hey, I realized like, I don't think this is for me. I'm going to go try, photography, or I'm going to go try ultimate Frisbee or whatever. I was like, great, good. Go find something else that you do feel passionate about, that you want to do this level for that. And once we kind of sort of got a critical mass that bought into that, then the numbers started coming back up, because we started like sort of identifying it, celebrating it. And in a lot of ways, like that wasn't me. A lot of ways that was, Evan Addison, that was Sean Egan, that was, Ethan Mayer, that was Vince Toomey, that, like that was those guys doing it.
I think it's a great point of you've got to have passion for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you've got to have kids that understand that it's okay if they're not passionate about running.
Right. It really is okay. Like there's no shame in coming to me and saying like, whoa, like I didn't know I was signing up for this, and I always say to those guys like, cool. Like, I'm really glad that you, number one, were reflective enough to realize that, number two, can like kind of try to think about where you want to put your efforts. But then I think the really cool thing, like the inclusive piece for me is like, but then what it allows like the 23-minute kid that is trying to break 20 minutes to be like in it and to be one of the guys. And like when that person breaks 20 minutes, like they get celebrated the same as somebody breaking 16. Like it's the same thing.
That's when you've got a good culture.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there was a time trial at the very end of the school year in one of those like lean years for us. Like, and lean like from the objective outside standpoint, like, okay, we didn't win any Catholic League titles, we're not on the state podium, et cetera. Where at the end of the year, remember we had this mile time trial and a kid broke 5 minutes for the first time. You would have thought it was Bannister. Like, I mean, he was on people's shoulders. They were carrying him around the track. And I remember looking, going like, it's so cool. Because it's one of our guys that, like, he trained super hard. I mean, he was like a 7-minute miler when he got here. He just broke 5. Everybody's like, doing that stuff.
That's cool. That's a great story. Really captures kind of the essence of what you want to aim for when you are trying to create something.
Yeah. And at the high school level, that's what we all have to be trying to create, All
right. So the last thing we typically do here is kind of like a rapid fire. So start out with your 3 favorite running related memories. It could be coaching, could be personal running, etc. We know, you were pretty stud athlete back in the day too. So
one, the first one that comes to my mind was, our first cross country state meet, we finished second. I think we came in ranked, at best case scenario, 5th, maybe 6th. It was a really special group. Some great, kind of senior leaders, Pat Donnelly, Sean McCullough, some great juniors, Tom O'Kane, Nick Malloy, Sean Quinn. That was a really cool day. It was our first state meet ever. Those guys just kind of helped set the standard. That was it was just a day. You don't have many of those days where like you just totally hit it out of the park and you feel like, wow, like that validated so much of what they had done. And that group then that spring went on and finished. Well, they ran 7:49 in the 4x8 at the outdoor state meet for 10th. So that year sticks out in my mind. Another one is kind of a weird take on it. The night that I was at Tom Coyle's graduation party, I got a call from Dan Lowry, and Dan Lowry had broken 4 minutes in the mile that night. And I just think like a neat little symbolism is like Dan Lowry breaks 4 minutes in the mile, first LaSalle alum ever to do it. And he does it on the day that I'm at Tom Coyle's graduation party. And fast forward 3 years and Tom Coyle does it himself. So, one of the things I'm most proud of was those 2 guys breaking 4 minutes. I think the record for a high school in the U.S. Between Stillwater in Minnesota and Jesuit in L.A. is 4. 2 of them is pretty cool. I'd be hard pressed not to add in the 2013 DMR at Penn. That was amazing. It was 10:04, U.S. number 1 at that point. That was awesome.
That's a great accomplishment. This one's a little bit harder, maybe easier. I don't know. The 2 biggest regrets that you have.
There's a lot. My own
hard.
And it's funny. It's funny is like I feel like I can answer that and say my own personal career felt like my entire college career, my cross country stuff was always a letdown, always a disappointment. And in part, I think it was because I just struggled managing my own pre-race nerves and anxiety or in-race nerves and anxiety. It's part of the reason why I love doing what I do now and trying to help guys not do the things that I did. I think I sort of, it's funny. I think sometimes the best runners ever may not make the best coaches because sometimes for those guys, they didn't have to go through the struggles that the normal runner goes through, So, on a personal level, I had plenty of my own struggles with some of those nerves and anxiety. I'm going to chalk most of my cross country stuff up and put it on the list. And then as a coach, there just been a bunch of times where I've had really good athletes who are in great shape and have gotten injured untimely. Evan Addison ended up with a stress reaction at the outdoor state meet his senior year. And I felt like he was ready to run really fast. Those are things that I, have a hard time, not moving on from, but they just, I know how much it disappointed him, and it, to see guys that work that hard and get to that level and, end up getting injured and, you ask yourself a million questions about, how it happened, why it happened, and there's been a few others like that. So.
Yeah, the injuries are always, I think, the biggest one that hurts the most when you might have been at the root of that.
Yeah.
The last question is one piece of advice you would have for either young coach or a young athlete getting started in the sport.
One is, they should ask a million questions, reach out to everybody they can, talk to as many people as they can, try to learn as much as they possibly can. And they just have to love it. If you're a young coach, I think so many times, caring about your athletes, being passionate about what you do can cover over some of those coaching mistakes that we're all inevitably going to make. I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to write the perfect workout every single time for every single kid, but if they believe in me and they believe in us, they believe in our training, then it is the perfect workout. It takes a long time to develop that. But I think passion and love for it goes a long, long way, and in terms of trying to write workouts, just talk to people, ask questions. What do they do? What's their week look like? What are, the most important workouts they do? What are core values that if you're asking lots of those questions and, pouring your heart and soul into it and caring immensely, you're off to a great start.
Absolutely. Hey, Greg, I want to thank you a lot for coming on. This was a great podcast. A lot of fun listening to your answers, and look forward to hopefully getting back out and getting a summer training in, and maybe that Briarwood cross country camp too, right?
Yeah, hopefully. That'd be great. Scott, thanks so much for having me. This was awesome, man. Really appreciate it.